Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Sunday at 7. So this week's lecture then is lecture 29. So it's moral education. So we are almost at the end of this book. We have about another month of lectures from this book, and then we'll be looking for something new to talk about. Yep, lecture 33 will be our last. So if there is something you would like me to go through next, a book you would like me to explore with you, then pop your suggestions below or message me and we'll see what we can do. I have a huge range of Montessori books, so there's a good chance that I might have the one if you want me to talk about it, or a particular topic you might want me to talk about. I can do that as well. Moral Education, lecture 29, given on the 3rd of December 1946. And Montessori wrote, "Moral teaching as the correction of moral defects is the basis of old education. How many times have I heard it said, take the stick away from the schools and we teachers may as well give up." And this isn't the way really, is it, to help children to develop moral education? But it's a question that Montessori says she's frequently asked. But why wouldn't we educate the individual? Because the individual is part of society, isn't it? They're not in opposition with each other. We educate and support children to do things right, to have good morals as individuals, and those children together form the society. So Montessori asks us not to see education of the individual and the education of society as in opposition, because society is composed of individuals. How can society not be improved if the individual is helped? If individual help is given, this does not mean that the child will develop into a hermit. Children will not turn into hermits or become solitary monks isolated in mountain caves. Morals are simply the rules of society. They do not exist without society. It is society that distinguishes between good and bad. Without society, there would be no morals. So I've gone through the rest of the lecture, and I've made my notes that I'm going to share with you this evening. So Montessori says that it's not a list of rules and punishments. It's something living that grows with the children, and it's to do with the society around them, which is why when they come into our Montessori environments, we show them how we can be kind and loving and respectful, how we care for the environment. I just need to say special hello to a friend of mine who's listening. Hello, Jessica. It's lovely to see you here. So Montessori wrote, "Education has been operating under a mistaken conception. It is a mistake to think that one person has to introduce everything to a child, morals, character, etc. It's wrong to think that these things are separate, because altogether they form a unity. And Montessori reminds us that character can't develop alone. A child's growth depends on the social life that surrounds them, the relationships, the trust we build, the freedom and the trust they experience in our Montessori classrooms, the environment we have prepared especially for them, where we trust them to access that environment, where they're free, where they can develop all of their skills, including their personality and their morals as well. They grow to be respectful, caring human beings." And she also talks about naughtiness. She says, "In early childhood, what we often call naughtiness is not moral failure. It's simply development. The special misbehaviours of little children that are called naughtiness. Naughtiness is not really a moral question. We call them difficult. This is a modern problem, the problem of difficult children." And in modern times, Montessori observed the children were being treated as if they were ill, but she reminds us, we must not think that, remember this is 1946, that in 1946 children have become worse all of a sudden. It's not a result of evolution. Children must be more or less the same as they've always been. But if we think back to 1946, children have just gone through some really traumatic and difficult times, haven't they? Just like some children in the world are now. You know, there's some awful situations around the world and wars and fights. And these things continue and they really affect our children. If something has gone wrong, she says, it's not the children. It's the conditions around them. And this can be everything. It can be how we cope with a child who's presenting with support needs and how we see that, not a difficult child, a child who needs support, the attitude of the adults around them, to the horrendous things that happen in the world as well, where we see children need our love and our care and our support. And she says it's not even a question that relates only to children. The question must be different from the standard questions asked about the correction of children, setting moral examples, improving physical conditions, and so forth. So what is missing? Is something psychological missing? Something essential to life that's been overlooked? And in her time, she was saying the clinics are the symbol at the moment. What everybody agrees on is that children are not bad in a moral sense. Their difficulties are like illnesses. When children reach about 7 years old, they begin to form a moral sense of right and wrong. We would argue possibly that they start this before the age of 7. But she says this is when true moral education can begin. Not through correction, but through real experiences, experience of what is right, of what is the correct thing to do. And we're giving our children those experiences in our classroom all the time, aren't we? Through their work, through their attitude to things that go wrong. That's my responsibility. I've dropped that, I'm going to pick it up. That's in the classroom and it's untidy, and I didn't drop that, but I can't see who may have done, so I'm going to help because I want it to be a lovely place in here, so I'm going to correct that myself because that's the correct thing to do. I have a good understanding of this. Montessori says that children at this age have a really strong sense of good and bad, and so it's during this time, so after our absorbent mind phase, that we can really help with the education of children around moral values. But prior to this, we're modelling them, aren't we, in our classrooms, in our homes. We're bringing our children up to follow the wonderful things that we do, the kind and caring things that we do, because that's what we want them to see, that's what we want them to copy. And Montessori praises movements such as the Scouting movement. And she put, Scouts are taught to help others. Not only are they taught these precepts, they practice them as well. The Scouting movement is especially well adapted to this period of life, and it's a great help for moral development. Now, I've not been part of the Scouting movement directly. I'm really aware of Scouts. My brother was a cub. But I've been hugely involved in girl guiding since I was a child. And when we think about the challenges we're set, and we go into brownies when we're 7. Now, there are younger groups these days for the children. So I believe Scouts used to start when they were 8, but before that was beavers. And now, actually, for our 4 and 5-year-olds, they have squirrels. When I was a little girl, it was brownies. And before brownies, we can go to rainbows. And they do wonderful things with the children. The children are, you know, in Scouts and brownies. They've just come out of the absorbent mind phase. They're not in our early years. They're in our primary years. And we go into things like brownies and Scouts. And the badges and the awards and things we do, they're about care of the environment, house orderly and how to look after your belongings, community service. And actually, Roman is 4 and he now attends one of these groups. He's only been there 2 weeks and he's just earned his first badge for community work. And I believe they did litter picking in the community. And I think at 4 years old, to be part of a group that's doing things as a group for their community, as well as having great fun, it's a wonderful organisation for our children to be part of. So Scouting, guiding, just wonderful things. They have the right attitude. The organisations are there and they do help with the moral development of children. So I ran a brownie group for many years. I actually did it until my husband got really, really ill, and then I had to give up because I was practically living at the hospital to care for him. But I had my brownie group and I ran it with 2 or 3 friends of mine. Somebody who'd been a girl guide came and helped with our brownies. And it was wonderful to actually go and do things with the girls for them to understand. And we met in a church. So we would do, you know, care of the church, and we would do collections and consider people abroad in countries where there were wars and things. And we would collect shoe boxes full of toys and everyday belongings for the children and have them sent out there so they had the things they needed. And some of the older girls would go. My niece, who I brought up, went out to Romania to do a community project. My daughter went out to Mexico to do a community project. And they're all wonderful things. But for me, what I noticed was I had the girls in my classroom when I taught up until between 4 and 5 when they went to school. And they left. And then at the age of 7, they came back to my Girl Guide unit. So they'd been away from me a couple of years. And most of my Girl Guide unit was made up with girls who'd previously been in nursery with me. And all of the girls were wonderful. All of the girls loved this idea of helping others, being respectful in their community, doing a good turn, all of those types of things. But when I used to take them on residential holidays, what I really noticed was if I had a group of children who had all been ones that had come through my nursery, not only were they the ones that had a really good understanding of, you know, the tasks that needed to be done and a moral responsibility and everybody setting the table for the lunch, they were actually the most skillful children in the group as well. So they could wash up, dry up, grate the carrots to make a coleslaw. They knew the safety in the kitchen because they had done all of those types of skills in their practical life when they'd been little girls with me. So it was wonderful to see them 2 years on now, having been at school for a couple of years, come back, and actually their physical skills, their use of tools, their concentration, their ability to finish the tasks of the jobs that were happening at Brownies and on holiday was more advanced than children who hadn't been through the Montessori system. So I always found that really interesting. So I am a huge advocate for scouting and girl guiding because I think our children learn so much that is good through those things. And you know, they can achieve and they can follow their interests and they can all take their beautiful belongings in for their hobbies badge or their collector's badge, and everybody respects each individual unique child's interests at Brownies and Guides as well. If you're with a unit that doesn't, then I encourage you to swap because it's what they should do. There's some wonderful girl guiding units about, and some of my friends are still leaders and I just love the things they do, taking part in community events, church events. There's some really wonderful activities happening. So if you need help with the moral development of your children, or you're just into having it extended within their projects, Scouts and Guides is definitely there for them. So as children grew older, Montessori says that the responsibility for this moral development shifts to us, the adults. It must be that there is something lacking in the treatment of children everywhere and of every age if we have these problems. Moral and social education, she insists, can't be separated. It's evident that all the things we've done, modern psychology, schools, etc., have not been enough. Some element must be added in the present form of society. That missing element is a new form of what she calls moral hygiene, a way to keep the spirit as healthy as the body. Remember, this is back in 1946. She wrote, "Today we need a positive contribution towards the betterment of the human soul. There must be a moral hygiene towards the family, school and the city, that they all make a contribution. This will be the progress of civilization." And finally in this, Montessori turns to the heart of the matter. And it's the adults, it's us. She says, "When I see how the number of naughty and difficult children are increasing today, I see it not as a question of the morality of children. It's more a question of something missing in the parents than in the children. If we're to make better conditions for the children, we must first consider the parents. The grown-ups must adapt themselves to the needs of the times. They must be less proud, less selfish and less dictatorial. The adults must look at themselves and say, yes, I understand the problem." So Montessori is asking us to look at the children, see what the problems are, look at ourselves for solutions. What is it we're missing? What are we not seeing? What do we need to do? And I think it's a really hard message, and I think she's a really strong lady if she stood up in public and said this to adults. But when we look round, you know, especially in the teaching industry, we quite often can see there's a lot lacking in some parenting styles. As teachers, we're here to support and teach. We're not here to teach your children right from wrong. We're not here to teach them moral standards. We can support them within our schools, but they have to come to us understanding those things from their life at home. They have to know right from wrong, that they shouldn't be stealing things, that it's not correct to be cruel to other people, that they have a responsibility for their belongings and the environment that they're in at the time. All of those messages have to come from the parents, the grandparents, the adults that are around the children at home. People have got to stand up and take responsibility for their children and not be looking everywhere else. School is where we go for an education, and that's what teachers are trained to do. Children have to turn up ready to learn with good moral standards. So if we reflect on what Montessori wrote, it's a timeless message, isn't it? Because she is correct. Moral education doesn't belong in the classroom, nor should correction. It's the adults around the child that should be teaching these things. Children have to grow in an atmosphere that we create, and it needs to be the correct atmosphere for them to grow correctly. So she says, if we want better children, first of all, we need to make sure that we are better adults. So it's only a very short lecture, that one, but I think it's quite important, really meaningful that, you know, a lot of adults, we do need to think, am I concentrating on my children? Am I here and present with my child? Or am I too busy playing on my mobile phone that I'm ignoring my child? And I was in the car the other day with Roman, and I'm always talking to him, but I was busy trying to do something on my phone, and he spoke to me 3 times and I didn't hear him. I was so focused on what I was doing. And in the end, my daughter said to me, Mum, can you hear that Roman's talking to you? And I was like, no, I didn't. And I really reflected on that and thought, oh my goodness, the message I was giving to him was, my phone is more important than listening to you. And I'd completely zoned out of what he was saying. And I think it's really important that, you know, when we're with our children and they're in the room, that we are playing with them or making sure they're engaged, and that we're not watching our children become frustrated because we're doing something actually that isn't as important as they are. I think we really need to reflect on, you know, the way we behave ourselves, what we do around our children. Because I have a Montessori classroom and I'm Montessori trained, I completely understand what I need to do in my classroom. I completely understand about supporting the children when they first come in, about teaching them the rules, and that actually the rules are there for everybody. But we need to also think at home, you know, what is the standard we want for our children? Do we let them make a huge mess and then walk away and then we just moan about them as we tidy it up? Or do we say to our children, okay, when we've played with this or when we've finished doing that, we'll tidy it up and then we'll do something else? Are we teaching them that responsibility? Actually, everybody is responsible for keeping the home tidy, for keeping it beautiful. We all have work to do. We all have jobs to do. Or are we too busy waiting on our children and doing everything for them and not teaching them responsibility and not teaching them respect for our belongings because we're too busy trying to do other things, or we're not actually standing back and thinking what is important? You know, are we with our children just letting them eat everything? Do they eat the top of one cake and then go along and eat the top of another cake and actually have no respect or value for food as well? Because that's another thing that I see with children. I think, do we learn to actually sit down and eat our meal together? And what's on our plate is our meal. So it's not our meal and then I'm going to have a cake and a chocolate bar and a packet of crisps as well. Because all of these things, aren't they just spoiling our children and not teaching them good values too? Respecting that, you know, some people in the world don't have enough food, yet we might sit and waste things. So I think it's really important that we reflect on what we do with our children, what we like around our children, and just take time to think, am I supporting my child to grow up to be considerate of others and respectful of their environment? Can they walk into groups that we go to and understand the rules within that group as well? Have we supported them to understand that in this place we sit quietly because that's what's expected, that's the norm in our society? Or do we always just make excuses for them? So I think, you know, it's a really important one where actually to help our children more, what we really need to do is to sit back and reflect and go through the situations and think about times when we need to talk to our children. So today my older grandson came to see me. He just happened to be going downtown and he walked the long way round and came to see me. So I was quite surprised to see him. And I'd spoken to my son in the week and said, well, I know he's older now and he goes downtown with his friends, but, you know, have you actually spoken to him about how he should behave when he's out now that he's going out independently? He was like, no. And I said, well, you know, it's really easy when you're out with friends to be influenced. We're coming up to those teenage years when sometimes we do things that are not quite right and we can be influenced by others. And so I think it's really important to actually go through, you know, when you're out with friends, what's acceptable and things that we shouldn't do or we mustn't get caught up in. So when he was here today, I had a quick chat with him and I said, you know, do you understand when you're out that you have a responsibility now? You haven't got an adult near you telling you not to do something. So what would you do if your friends did the wrong thing? What would you do if somebody in the group went to steal something? You need to think about these situations because they might just happen. And you won't do those things because you've been brought up to know that they're wrong. But what about if somebody else did? Would you know to step away and say, I'm not going to be part of this, thank you, and I'm going home, or I'm going to ring my dad, or just quietly walk away and ring your parent? Or would you feel too scared to that and stay as part of the group because you didn't want to be a sissy? And I said, but, you know, that attitude will get you a police record as a young boy for life. And he said, no, I would ring my dad, Grandma. I do know what to do. And I said, okay, that's really good. But it's really important that we have these conversations with our children about doing right from wrong and making good decisions, because sadly these days, decisions will follow them for life. And if the wrong person is upset by your action, you know, they could call the police in on a group of young children, couldn't they, just to teach them a lesson. And the moment you have a police record, that's not going to disappear. So I think working with other children as well, beyond the 6-year-olds now, I have older children coming through the classroom. I see my grandchildren growing older. I do sit back and think, have they had those messages? Do they know what's important? Has somebody taken the time to sit and have a discussion with them? Because those discussions are so important. Those young people, they are going to be our adults, and we don't want them making silly mistakes now that are going to ruin their lives and stay on their record. Because I'm sure if a child now thought something was fun, it's funny, oh, we went in there and we pinched some chocolate bars. And they would be devastated if they went to be a policeman when they were older and they had a police record and had to explain it. You know, how long do these things sit on our records? I don't know. So I think don't be scared to have those conversations with your children as well about what is right, what is wrong, but also to give them options. So we mustn't be dictating what they should do. You must not go out and, because some children will just take us up on the challenge. But we need to talk through the consequences, because if they've not been in a situation, they're not going to understand what could happen to them. So taking that time to sit and talk to our children about what is morally right, what's the best thing to do in society, things they shouldn't get involved in, things they can come to you about if they see it happening, that's going to support them when they're older to be good adults too. So with my children, I was always really honest with them, and I would say to them, this is what we need to do, or this is what shouldn't happen. And they would then also come and say, oh, well, I know who stole that. And I say, well, go and tell your teacher then. I know who's doing this at school. I'd say, well, go and inform your teacher then, and make sure you distance yourself from it, because we have to give our children the strength to do the right thing as well. And they have to know that we're going to back them up, but not back them up if they make the wrong decision. Then they have to answer the consequences. So that is our lecture on moral education, and a little bit of information about how I've applied it to mine. I hope you enjoyed that. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.